It all started with a promise, a simple one really. Don't worry, your salary will be processed by next week. That's what my boss said 6 months ago. 6 whole months. Every week after that, I'd remind him gently, sometimes with a message, sometimes in person. Sir, just checking if the salary issue has been resolved. He'd nod, pretend to check something on his screen, and then say, Yes, yes, soon. I wanted to believe him. I really did, because in that office, hope was the only thing that kept most of us going. I joined that company full of energy, ready to work hard and prove myself. It wasn't a big firm, but it had potential, good clients, creative projects, and a team that believed we could grow together. My boss, Mr. Hamid, was sharp, confident, and charming in meetings. To clients, he was everything you'd want in a leader. But to us, his team, he was distant, cold, and over time, careless. The first month my salary was delayed. I didn't complain much. I thought maybe it was just a technical issue. But when it happened again in the second month, I began to worry. Rent was due, bills were piling up, and I had to keep making excuses to my landlord. Every time I asked about payment, I'd get the same answer. We're waiting for a client's payment to clear. At first, I believed him. After all, the company relied heavily on one big client, a corporate account that made up nearly half our revenue. Without them, the office lights might have gone out months ago. But as weeks turned into months, I started seeing things that didn't add up. The boss would walk in wearing new watches, talking about his weekend trips, and hosting client dinners at expensive restaurants. Yet somehow, there wasn't enough money to pay the team. One Friday evening, when most people had already left the office, I stayed back to finish a project. The boss was on a call in his cabin, his voice slightly raised. Through the glass wall, I could see him pacing. I told you not to pull out now, he said into the phone. We're close to finishing your campaign. His tone was desperate, something I had never heard before. He ended the call, slammed the phone on the desk, and just sat there, rubbing his forehead. I didn't know it then, but that call would change everything. The next week, I reminded him again about the salary. This time, he didn't even pretend to care. He just waved his hand, saying, We'll sort it out soon. But there was something in his eyes, something uneasy, like fear hiding behind arrogance. That same day, I overheard two coworkers whispering near the coffee machine. Did you hear? The big client might be leaving, one said. No way, the other replied. That would destroy us. I wanted to ask, but I kept quiet. Rumors spread fast in small offices, and I didn't want to be part of the gossip. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about it. If that client left, it would explain everything. The delays, the frustration, the tension in the air. Days passed, and I noticed how everyone's energy started to fade. Deadlines didn't matter anymore. Even laughter disappeared. We'd all show up, pretend to work, and leave early. It felt like being on a sinking ship, pretending everything was fine while the water kept rising. One afternoon, I got a message from the client's assistant, someone I had coordinated with for months. Hey, just wanted to thank you for all your help. It's been great working with you, she wrote. My heart sank. It didn't sound like a goodbye for a small break, it sounded permanent. I replied, Wait, what do you mean? But she didn't answer. Later that evening, when I entered the office, the boss was sitting in the dark. The lights were off except for the glow of his computer screen. His tie was loose, and his desk was cluttered with empty coffee cups. Everything okay, sir? I asked quietly. He looked up at me, his eyes red. They left, he said softly. The client just terminated the contract. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The silence between us felt heavy. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. We'll have to delay salaries again. Maybe just for a few more months. I stood there, frozen. 6 months of waiting. 6 months of polite reminders, patience, and hope, all for nothing. My mind flashed through every sleepless night, every promise he broke, and every time I believed his lies. Something inside me snapped. But I didn't argue. Not yet. I simply nodded and walked out. I could feel my heart pounding, but strangely, I also felt calm. Maybe it was the kind of calm that comes when you realize there's nothing left to lose. Over the weekend, I started gathering proof, old emails, chat screenshots, invoices that showed how much work we'd done for that client. Because deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. My boss thought he could ignore me forever, that I'd stay silent while he blamed cash flow for his mistakes. But what he didn't know was that the biggest twist was still waiting for him. When Monday came, the office was unusually quiet. Everyone seemed tense, waiting for some kind of announcement. The boss called a sudden meeting, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. He started talking about restructuring, budget constraints, and temporary adjustments. But as he spoke, a familiar voice interrupted him, one none of us expected to hear again. And that's when everything changed. The voice that interrupted him was calm but firm. It was from the client's project manager, Mr. Rashid. Everyone turned toward the office door, shocked. None of us expected to see him again, especially after the client had supposedly ended their contract. He walked in with quiet confidence, holding a small folder in his hand. My boss's face turned pale. "Rashid, I didn't know you were coming," he stammered. Rashid smiled faintly, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "I know you didn't," he said. "That's why I came unannounced." The tension in the room thickened. We could all feel it. Something serious was about to unfold. Rashid placed the folder on the table and looked around the room. "You all deserve to know why our company decided to leave," he said. My boss tried to cut him off, saying, "That's not necessary, Rashid. We can talk privately." But Rashid ignored him completely. He continued, his tone steady. "4 months, we noticed delays, errors, and excuses. We trusted this company to handle our campaigns professionally, but instead, we got missed deadlines and poor communication. I looked at my coworkers. They were frozen, eyes darting between Rashid and the boss. Everyone knew the truth. The delays weren't our fault. We had done our part. It was the boss who ignored our warnings, who refused to approve budgets on time, who kept pushing projects without giving clear directions. Now, all of it was coming to light. My boss tried to defend himself, claiming that the team failed to meet expectations. That's when Rashid's calm expression changed. He opened the folder and took out printed emails. "Really?" he said, his voice firm. "Because I have records of your team submitting their work weeks before the deadlines. You, on the other hand, kept delaying approvals. You even ignored our last 3 follow-up messages about pending invoices." The room went silent. My boss couldn't say a word. I could almost hear his breathing getting heavier. Rashid turned to us. "You all did a good job. I've seen the effort you put in. The problem was never you." His words felt like a small spark of justice in that suffocating room. For the first time in months, I felt seen. But the moment was brief. Rashid then turned back to my boss. "We trusted you, Hamid. But you used our project funds for something else, didn't you?" Everyone's eyes widened. My heart skipped a beat. "Use the funds?" That explained everything. The luxury watches, the fancy dinners, the constant excuses. I could see the truth, slowly unraveling in front of everyone. The boss's lips trembled as he tried to respond, but Rashid cut him off again. "Don't bother denying it. We traced the transaction trail. You billed us for campaigns that never existed. Our finance team found the mismatch." The silence was unbearable. The boss's face turned red, and for a moment, I thought he might lash out. But instead, he just said quietly, "You don't understand. I was trying to keep the company alive." Rashid shook his head. "By lying, by stealing from your own team and your clients." I didn't say a word. No one did. The truth hung heavy in the air. The boss looked smaller somehow, like all the confidence and arrogance he once carried had drained away. Rashid sighed. "We could take legal action, but we won't. We're done with you. But your employees deserve to know the truth." And with that, he walked out, leaving the folder behind. When the door closed, everyone turned toward the boss. His eyes darted around, searching for some sympathy, but there was none left. People started whispering, some grabbing their bags quietly. The boss muttered, "Don't believe him. He's exaggerating." But his voice cracked, and no one believed a word. I stood there watching him. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He looked lost, like a man who had built his own trap and couldn't find a way out. But then I remembered the countless times he had ignored us, the promises he broke, the way he dismissed our worries. Any sympathy I had vanished. As the office emptied out, I stayed back, sitting at my desk, trying to make sense of everything. The boss walked into his cabin and shut the door. Through the glass, I could see him sitting alone, staring at his computer. It was strange. The same man who used to command the room with authority now looked like a shadow of himself. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Rashid said, about the funds, the lies, the betrayal. I remember the client's emails, the projects we worked on day and night, and how he always said there wasn't enough money. I realized that while we were struggling to survive, he was living comfortably off our hard work. The next morning, I reached the office early. The air felt different, heavy and quiet. Most of the desks were empty. Some of my coworkers had already quit. I saw resignation letters on their keyboards. The boss hadn't shown up yet, but his cabin door was slightly open. Out of curiosity, I peeked inside. His desk was a mess, papers scattered everywhere, the folder Rashid left behind still lying there. I noticed something strange. A letter, half crumpled, with a client's logo on it. I picked it up. It was a payment confirmation, dated 3 months ago. The client had cleared all dues, yet we never got paid. I felt my hands tremble. That was the proof I needed. He had the money all along. He just chose to keep it. I folded the paper and slipped it into my bag. My mind was racing. Part of me wanted to confront him, but another part told me to wait. If I handled this wrong, he could twist the story and make me the villain. By afternoon, he finally showed up. He looked tired, unshaven and distracted. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away. "Morning," he mumbled, pretending to check his phone. I wanted to ask about the letter, but instead I just said, "Are we still supposed to keep working?" He paused, then said, "Of course. We'll bounce back." But even he didn't sound convinced. The rest of the day dragged on in silence. No clients called. No new projects came in. The phone barely rang. It was like the whole world had moved on, leaving us behind. As the sun began to set, I packed my things. I could feel something shifting inside me. Anger, disappointment, maybe both. But I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't the end. Before leaving, I glanced at his cabin one last time. He was still sitting there, head in his hands. The folder was open in front of him, and he was staring at Rashid's notes. He looked broken, but I couldn't forget what he'd done. The truth was out there now, and it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart completely. That night, as I walked home under the dim streetlights, I kept thinking about what would happen next. Would he come clean? Would he try to fix it? Or would he sink deeper into lies? Something told me he wasn't done yet. There was still more to uncover, more secrets hiding behind that calm office facade. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, the office felt different. There was a low hum of conversation, but the air was tense, like everyone was waiting for something to happen. Rumors were spreading fast. Whispers about the client, about the missing funds, about whether the boss would even survive the scandal. People were wary, checking their emails, peeking at their phones, glancing at each other as if trying to read thoughts in someone else's eyes. I could feel the anxiety building around me, and yet I couldn't stop watching the boss. He arrived late, his usual swagger gone, replaced by a nervous stiffness. He greeted no one, walked straight to his cabin, and closed the door. From behind the glass walls, I noticed him rifling through the folder Rashid had left. He paused, muttered something under his breath, then slammed the papers down. I wondered if he was realizing the full extent of what he had done, or if he was already thinking of ways to cover it up. Meanwhile, my coworkers were divided. Some were quietly consoling each other, exchanging theories about the client's sudden departure. Others, braver or angrier, were speaking out. "How did he think we wouldn't notice?" one whispered to me. "We've been doing all the work, and he's taking the credit and the money." The frustration in their voices mirrored my own. Months of hard work had been overshadowed by one person's selfish choices. But there was a different energy now. It wasn't just anger. It was a need for answers, for justice, for some kind of reckoning. I decided to focus on gathering more evidence. Over the past week, I had compiled emails, invoices, and project reports that clearly showed the boss's negligence and mismanagement. But as I dug deeper, I started noticing patterns that went beyond just the missing salary. There were discrepancies in budgets, unexplained expenses, and approvals that didn't make sense. The deeper I looked, the clearer it became that this problem had been building for years, not months. At the same time, another subplot began to emerge. One of our team members, Sarah, had been quietly trying to maintain her position while also documenting everything. She had a connection with someone in the client's finance department and had been sending them updates without the boss knowing. Her efforts had likely accelerated the client's decision to leave, though no one could confirm it yet. Sarah's role made things more complicated. She was walking a fine line between loyalty to the team and secrecy, and I could see her struggling under the weight of her choices. The boss seemed to sense something shifting. He started holding small meetings with individual team members, trying to get them to take sides, to stay quiet, to cover up mistakes. Some people gave in, nervous about losing their jobs. Others refused to play along. It was like watching a power struggle in slow motion. The office felt like a battlefield where loyalty, fear, and ambition were all fighting for dominance. By midweek, the tension had escalated. Clients who had previously been quiet were calling, demanding updates. Some of them were frustrated because deadlines had been missed. Others were questioning invoices and payments. Each phone call seemed to push the boss closer to the edge. I could hear him pacing in his cabin, muttering numbers and dates, trying to make excuses that no one would buy. At the same time, my own anxiety was growing. I knew that if I confronted him too soon, he could manipulate the narrative. If I stayed silent, more innocent people might suffer, or the company could collapse entirely. I needed a plan, but it wasn't clear what the first step should be. Meanwhile, Sarah approached me quietly one afternoon. "I think we need to be careful," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "He's desperate, and desperate people do unpredictable things." Her warning made my stomach churn. We were no longer dealing with just financial mismanagement. This had become a test of character, of courage, of who could hold their ground when everything around them was unraveling. Adding another layer to the conflict, the boss's personal behavior was beginning to spill over into the office culture. He snapped at people for minor mistakes, spread rumors to distract from his own failures, and even tried to play us against each other. The environment, which had once been somewhat tolerable, was now charged with suspicion and fear. Every glance, every conversation felt like a potential trap. I had to remind myself constantly to separate fact from manipulation, truth from lies. Late one evening, I stayed behind, reviewing old invoices and payment confirmations. That's when I found something unusual, a pattern in the client's communications that suggested they had been unhappy far earlier than anyone had known. If this was true, the boss had been ignoring signs of trouble for months, or worse, actively sabotaging relationships to cover his own tracks. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. The betrayal ran deeper than I thought. As the days went by, the office became a pressure cooker. Small conflicts between co-workers started to flare up, arguments about who was responsible for missed tasks, who had warned the boss, and who should take action next. Amid all this chaos, I began hearing stories from past employees who had left quietly, sharing hints about similar issues that had happened before. It became clear that this was not an isolated incident. The patterns of negligence, mismanagement, and dishonesty stretched back years. By the end of the week, I realized that the conflict had grown beyond salary delays or the loss of a single client. It had become a test of integrity, accountability, and survival. Everyone in the office was caught in a web of fear, uncertainty, and moral dilemmas. The boss, once untouchable, was now vulnerable, but still dangerous in ways that could affect all of us. And the client's sudden departure had only been the first domino. I also started considering external perspectives, how this story would look to future clients, to industry contacts, even to regulators. The potential fallout was enormous. The boss had underestimated the ripple effects of his actions, and now everyone was feeling the consequences. The tension wasn't just internal anymore. It was spreading outward, threatening reputations, livelihoods, and trust that had taken years to build. Even as I planned my next moves, I knew that timing was crucial. One wrong step, one premature confrontation, and the situation could spiral beyond control. The story had many layers: financial betrayal, broken trust, team loyalty, and hidden agendas. Each piece added complexity, and the pressure to act was mounting. Every glance at the boss reminded me that he was calculating, waiting for us to make a mistake, and that this conflict could explode at any moment. And still, despite all the tension, uncertainty, and fear, I couldn't shake a strange sense of anticipation. Something was coming, something that would change everything in the office, but no one knew exactly when or how. All I knew was that we were standing at the edge of a storm, and the fallout from months of lies, deceit, and ignored warnings was about to hit. Every message, every phone call, every whispered conversation became a puzzle piece in this unfolding drama. And as I left the office that night, I knew that the next chapter would be even more intense. The boss may have thought he was untouchable, but the truth was closer than he realized, and when it finally came out, nothing would ever be the same. The following week, the office felt like it was teetering on the edge of chaos. Every step I took down the hallway, every email that pinged in my inbox, carried a weight I hadn't felt before. People were quiet, but their eyes told the story: fear, frustration, and barely contained anger. I could feel it building like electricity in the air, a storm that was ready to break at any moment. The boss arrived later than usual that morning. He looked sharper somehow, but in a tense, forced way, the kind of composure someone tries to hold when they know it's slipping. As he walked past us, I caught him glancing at the folder Rashid had left behind. He didn't know I saw it, but the flicker of panic in his eyes confirmed it. He knew he was running out of time. Meetings became shorter, more abrupt. He started micromanaging projects in ways that felt frantic rather than productive, sending emails in the middle of the night and calling team members without notice. Each action seemed like a defensive move, a desperate attempt to regain control. But instead of calming the office, it fueled the tension. People were talking in hushed tones, speculating about what he was planning, what he might do next, and whether more secrets would come to light. I noticed subtle changes in my coworkers, too. Some were quietly gathering their own evidence, checking old emails, screenshots, and payment records. Others were watching the boss, looking for weaknesses, or trying to figure out whether it was safe to confront him. Sarah, in particular, seemed to be balancing two worlds, staying loyal to the team while maintaining a line of communication with outside contacts from the client's company. I could see the weight of her decisions in her eyes, the hesitation, and the worry that one wrong move could put everything at risk. Then came the first confrontation, subtle, almost accidental, but electric in its intensity. A junior employee, usually quiet and reserved, walked into the boss's cabin to ask about a pending approval. Instead of the usual dismissal, the boss snapped. "I already told you, we're dealing with bigger problems right now. Stop bothering me with minor things." His voice was sharp, cutting through the office like a whip. The employee froze, stunned by the outburst. But I noticed something remarkable. Instead of backing down, the young worker held their ground, quietly but firmly saying, "We've done everything we were asked to do, and we deserve to be treated fairly." The room went tense. Everyone was listening. I could feel the weight of the words in the air, the unspoken truth hitting hard. This wasn't just about projects or clients anymore. It was about respect, integrity, and accountability. The boss's face tightened, and for the first time, I saw him falter. But he quickly masked it with anger, a shield against the reality he didn't want to face. Over the next few days, the office became a battlefield of small, high-stakes maneuvers. People were testing boundaries, watching for reactions, trying to gauge how far the boss would go to protect himself. Emails were being drafted, messages saved, screenshots captured. Everything could be used as leverage. There was a constant tension, like a taut rope ready to snap. Everyone was waiting for the moment when the truth would explode into view, and no one knew who would act first. Meanwhile, external pressure was mounting. I started receiving subtle messages from the client's team, updates that suggested they were still monitoring the situation closely, waiting for proof before taking further action. The knowledge that they were watching, silently but intently, made the office feel like it was under a microscope. Every decision, every misstep by the boss, was being recorded in more ways than we could see. Then came the warning signs that this was about to reach its boiling point. The boss began locking doors, making calls behind closed walls, and occasionally shouting instructions that didn't make sense. People were on edge, moving quickly but cautiously, trying not to attract attention. Whispers filled the office corners, conversations stopped mid-sentence, and the tension became almost unbearable. It felt like the entire environment was holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable. One afternoon, I found myself alone in the office with the boss for the first time in days. He looked exhausted, tense and oddly quiet. For a moment, I thought I might finally confront him, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I simply said, "Sir, we need clarity. Everyone is waiting." He looked at me, his eyes flickering between anger and desperation. "Clarity," he muttered. "You don't understand, it's complicated." I nodded, but I knew better. There was nothing complicated about truth and accountability. The next day, an email landed in our shared inbox, a formal message from the client requesting a final report and clarification on pending payments. The boss read it, his hand shaking slightly. Everyone was watching. I could feel it, the tension reaching its peak. No one spoke, but the silence was deafening. We all knew that the coming days would decide everything. By evening, alliances within the office had begun to form. Some people were quietly banding together to share information and plan steps forward. Others were still hesitant, unsure if it was safe to take action. The energy in the office was a mixture of fear, determination, and anticipation. It felt like we were all standing on a precipice, looking down into unknown territory. One small push, one wrong move, and everything could fall apart. Late that night, I stayed behind to review more documents, piecing together the sequence of mismanagement and deception. Every line of evidence, every email chain, every approval that had been delayed painted a clearer picture. The boss had knowingly jeopardized the company, the client, and the livelihoods of his own team. The enormity of what I held in my hands was staggering. I could feel the suspense building inside me, a knot that tightened with every passing hour. I looked across the empty office and imagined the confrontation that was coming. The boss was no longer untouchable, his control had begun to crumble. But he was unpredictable, and I knew he could lash out in ways we hadn't yet seen. Everyone in the office was caught in a web of fear, frustration, and anticipation. The client's departure, the missing payments, the betrayal, all of it was leading to a moment that no one could ignore. As I shut off the lights and stepped outside, the cool night air hit me. The city was quiet, but in my mind, the storm was raging. The climax was coming. The tensions, the secrets, the betrayals, they were all on the edge of exploding. I could feel it in my chest, a tight, relentless anticipation. Every message, every whisper, every misstep was pushing us closer to a confrontation that would change everything. And I knew without a doubt that once it happened, there would be no turning back. The truth was about to surface, and the fallout would touch everyone in the office, the boss, the team, and the client. But how it would unfold, who would survive, and who would be exposed first, no one knew. Not yet. The next few hours, the next few days, were going to be decisive. And in the back of my mind, one question kept repeating: when the storm finally hits, will we be ready? The next morning, the office felt charged in a way that made every heartbeat louder. People moved cautiously, speaking in whispers, their eyes constantly flicking toward the boss's cabin. I could feel the tension like a live wire. Everyone knew something was about to happen, but no one could predict exactly what. Even the air seemed heavier, thick with unspoken questions and fears. Just as the clock struck 10, an unexpected email notification popped up on everyone's screens. It was from a senior partner at the client company, not Rashid, but someone higher up. My stomach sank when I read the subject line. Immediate attention required. Audit of all accounts and payments. The email detailed that an audit would begin immediately, reviewing every transaction, every invoice, and every report tied to our company. It wasn't just the client leaving anymore. It was now an investigation. Panic rippled through the office. The boss stormed out of his cabin, pale and shaking, trying to mask his fear with forced authority. "It's just a routine check," he shouted, though his voice betrayed him. No one believed it. Everyone knew better by now. The office had turned into a powder keg, and that email was the spark that could set it all off. Meanwhile, Sarah approached me quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "This audit, it could expose everything," she whispered. Her eyes were wide, urgent. "Not just the missing payments. Everything he's been hiding for years." I nodded. I had already suspected that the boss's negligence and deception went far deeper than we had realized, but now it was official. The stakes had suddenly jumped, and the tension was unbearable. Then came the second twist. Out of nowhere, A phone rang from the boss's office. Everyone froze. It was his personal line, and when he answered, his face drained of color. The conversation was brief but explosive. I couldn't hear everything, but a few words slipped through. Unforgivable, legal action, immediate reporting. When he hung up, he didn't speak. He just stared at the floor, trembling slightly. It was clear that someone else, higher than the client, was aware of his actions. This wasn't just internal fallout anymore. The consequences were moving upward and fast. The office buzzed with whispers and speculation. What had he done this time? Who was calling him? Everyone sensed the danger, the way it clawed at the edges of our professional lives. People began quietly preparing, gathering documents, screenshots, emails. Everyone knew that what happened next could either destroy the company or finally bring justice. Adding to the tension, a former employee, someone who had left months ago under mysterious circumstances, suddenly returned. He didn't announce himself. He just walked into the office, calm but purposeful. The rumor mill went wild. Why was he back? What did he know? Whispers spread that he had proof, more evidence of the boss's misconduct, something the client or auditors hadn't seen yet. His presence alone made the air thicker, more charged. Everyone felt it. The walls were closing in. The boss, for the first time, looked genuinely cornered. His usual sharpness and arrogance were replaced with a visible panic. He tried to rally his team, speaking fast, trying to maintain control, but no one was listening. The trust was gone. Every eye in the room was on him, every mind racing with what might come next. Even I felt the pressure rising. The missing salaries, the client's departure, the pending audit, all of it had created a perfect storm. But now, with a returning former employee who might have additional proof, the stakes had climbed higher than I imagined. I knew that every move, every word, every decision we made could tip the balance. The boss retreated to his cabin, slamming the door, but it felt like a trap closing in. From my desk, I watched as his hands shook over the keyboard. He was trying to craft a story, a defense, anything to delay the inevitable. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be enough. The threads of his deception were unraveling too quickly, and the walls around him were collapsing. By late afternoon, the whispers turned into murmurs of action. Coworkers quietly shared what they knew, exchanging messages and notes. The former employee spoke to a few of us in hushed tones, revealing pieces of the puzzle that made the boss's lies even clearer. The story was bigger than we thought. It wasn't just salary delays or client mismanagement. There were misappropriated funds, hidden approvals, and decisions that risked the entire company's future. As the day ended, the boss finally emerged, exhausted, visibly drained, but with a spark of determination, or maybe desperation. He called a sudden meeting and tried to regain control. But the moment he opened his mouth, the tension in the room was palpable. Everyone was waiting. Every whisper, every glance, every movement was loaded with anticipation. We were all holding our breath, knowing that the next few hours would push the conflict to a breaking point. I realized then that this wasn't just about money or clients anymore. This was about power, integrity, and survival. The second twist, the audit, the higher-level scrutiny, the returning former employee, had changed everything. The boss could no longer manipulate, delay, or deflect. The countdown had begun, and the fallout was inevitable. Even as I packed my bag to leave that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the climax was very close. Every unresolved tension, every hidden truth, every layer of betrayal was converging, and when it finally exploded, no one would be untouched. The office, the boss, the team, all of us were standing on the edge of something monumental. And deep down, I knew that whatever happened next, the story would never be the same again. The storm was coming, and there was no escape. The next morning, the office felt like it was holding its breath. Everyone arrived early, more alert than usual, aware that today would be decisive. The boss walked in quietly, pale, moving with a tension that betrayed his usual confidence. The folder Rashid had left was on his desk, the evidence glaring at him like a silent judge. He avoided eye contact, but I could see his fingers twitching over the edge of the folder. He knew the storm had arrived. Sarah and I exchanged a glance. The former employee had gathered with a few of us earlier, quietly reviewing invoices, emails, and project logs. Every detail now seemed to fit together like pieces of a puzzle, months of lies, delays, and mismanagement laid bare in black and white. We were ready. The tension was electric, each second stretching as if the office itself was waiting for the confrontation. The boss called an emergency meeting, summoning the whole team. He tried to speak first, but his voice was shaky, lacking the authority he had once wielded so easily. I know things haven't been smooth. I've made mistakes, but, he faltered, and we all waited, silently calculating our next move. It was the moment we had been waiting for, the tipping point where truth would finally collide with lies. Sarah stepped forward first, calm but firm. Sir, the mistakes aren't small. They're months of delayed salaries, mismanaged funds, and broken promises. The client left because of decisions you made, not because of the team. And now, with this audit, everything will be revealed. Her words cut through the room, precise and undeniable. I followed, adding the compiled evidence, emails, screenshots, payment records. This isn't just about work. It's about integrity, fairness, and accountability. We can't keep covering for something that was never our fault. The boss's face shifted through a spectrum of emotions: shock, panic, and finally, desperation. He tried to interrupt, stammering, "You don't understand, it wasn't just me," but his explanations fell flat. Every fact we presented was backed with proof, and the room was filled with the silent weight of truth. For the first time, the office hierarchy felt reversed. The power had shifted, and the boss was trapped by the very lies he had created. Just as it seemed the confrontation had reached its peak, the phone rang. Everyone froze. The boss's hand shook as he picked it up, and we could see the tension ripple through him. It was Rashid, the client's former project manager, his voice calm but authoritative. "Hamid, we've reviewed the documents you submitted. There's more here than we anticipated. The investigation will continue, and the decisions from here on are no longer yours to make." The room fell silent. The boss's shoulders slumped. The moment of reckoning had arrived. The client and auditors had taken control. But just as we thought the climax had reached its conclusion, an unexpected twist arrived. The returning former employee revealed another layer of deception. He had discovered a separate client account that the boss had attempted to manipulate, siphoning funds in a way that neither the team nor the auditors had initially noticed. The shock hit everyone, including me. The stakes had escalated yet again. But the difference this time was that the boss had no escape. The evidence was irrefutable, the team united, and external forces now fully aware. The tension in the office was suffocating. Every eye fixed on him as he finally dropped his defenses. His voice was low, defeated. I didn't think anyone would find out," he admitted. We all realized the magnitude of the situation. Months of ignored warnings, delayed salaries, lost clients, and hidden schemes had finally collided. The team had survived the storm, but the boss's authority was gone. There was a mix of relief, anger, and disbelief in the room. We had exposed the truth, defended ourselves, and reclaimed control of our work and integrity. Just when we thought the climax had passed, another notification pinged on the office system, an automated message from the client's finance team. Everyone leaned in. It wasn't just about lost funds or audits anymore. The message revealed a pending legal review, indicating that the company could face serious penalties if certain mismanaged accounts weren't corrected immediately. The final twist left everyone speechless. The storm wasn't entirely over, it had evolved. Even as the boss sat quietly, broken and defeated, the office realized that accountability was only beginning. We had won the first battle, exposing the lies and reclaiming our dignity, but the consequences of his actions were still unfolding. The tension lingered, unresolved in a way that left every one of us alert, wary, and ready for what came next. And deep down, I knew that this story, which had started with ignored salaries and lost clients, had grown into something much bigger. A story of power, deception, loyalty, and the unrelenting truth that could no longer be hidden. The office had survived, but the final chapter, the ultimate resolution of consequences, was still waiting just around the corner. The storm had passed, but its echo would haunt us all. The office felt strangely quiet the next morning. The tension from the previous days had eased slightly, replaced by a cautious calm. Everyone arrived early, some with sleepy eyes, others with nervous energy. Even the boss walked in slowly, shoulders slumped, carrying the weight of defeat. He avoided eye contact, quietly taking his usual seat, his presence now diminished and almost invisible. The storm had passed, but the ripple effects of the events were still very much alive. Sarah and I were the first to arrive at our desks. We started organizing the evidence we had collected, making sure every document, every screenshot, and every record was accounted for. It felt almost surreal to see the truth laid out so clearly, months of lies, deception, and mismanagement finally exposed. The air in the office had shifted. People who had been frustrated and fearful now looked alert and purposeful. The team's unity had grown stronger through the crisis, and I could feel the energy of collaboration returning. The boss called a brief meeting, but it was unlike anything we had experienced before. His voice was low, lacking authority, and for the first time, he listened rather than dictated. "I understand I've made mistakes," he said almost quietly, "and I know that my actions have caused serious consequences. I can't undo what's been done, but I want to cooperate fully with the audit and any measures the company needs to take." There was no defense, no excuses, just acknowledgement. It was the moment that finally allowed closure to begin. The team started addressing pending issues. Payroll was prioritized, and arrangements were made to ensure everyone received their delayed salaries promptly. It was a relief to see the office buzzing with productivity again. People worked together with a renewed sense of purpose, motivated not just by tasks but by the lessons learned from months of frustration and neglect. The client's audit, which had seemed terrifying initially, became a structured process because of the evidence we had collected. The truth had given us leverage, control, and peace of mind. During this time, I noticed changes in my coworkers as well. Some who had been quiet or hesitant during the height of the conflict now spoke up more confidently. Sarah, in particular, emerged as a strong voice, helping coordinate communications with the client and guiding the team on how to present accurate data. The former employee who had returned to assist us also became instrumental in ensuring everything was documented correctly. His presence reminded everyone that transparency and honesty could win against deception and fear. The boss, meanwhile, was no longer the center of authority. His attempts to regain control had failed, and the team collectively decided to operate with more independence, reporting directly to the client or to external auditors when necessary. This redistribution of responsibility not only improved workflow, but also reduced the possibility of future mismanagement. It was a hard lesson for everyone, especially him, that leadership was built on trust and accountability, not on fear or deception. Weeks passed, and the company slowly began to stabilize. Clients, once hesitant, started returning after being assured that proper measures were in place. The audit concluded without major penalties for the team, thanks to the evidence we had preserved. The boss faced repercussions for his mismanagement, including stricter oversight and limits on his decision-making authority. It was a sobering reminder of how accountability could change the dynamics of a workplace, ensuring that trust was earned, not taken for granted. Through it all, the team grew closer. We had experienced the full spectrum of workplace challenges, broken trust, fear, hidden agendas, and had navigated through them together. The shared experience created an unspoken bond, one that made collaboration easier and the office environment healthier. Lessons were learned, and policies were revised to prevent anything similar from happening in the future. Transparency became the foundation of the company culture, and the team's resilience became its most valuable asset. I took a moment one evening to reflect on everything. The delayed salaries, the lost client, the secret manipulations, each had been a catalyst for change. What had started as frustration and helplessness became a journey of empowerment and self-advocacy. I realized that standing up for truth and integrity wasn't just about exposing wrongdoing. It was about protecting the people who had been affected and creating a workplace where fairness and honesty were non-negotiable. Even the former employee, who had returned unexpectedly, decided to stay for a while, mentoring younger team members and helping establish clear processes. His presence symbolized that past mistakes didn't have to define the future. Lessons could be shared, and systems could improve. Sarah's leadership and guidance became a model for others, showing that collaboration and integrity could overcome fear and mismanagement. The boss, though humbled, slowly adapted to the new reality. His attempts to rebuild trust were met with cautious acceptance. The experience had left a permanent mark, a reminder that leadership was not just about authority, but about responsibility, transparency, and respect for the people who made the company function. The team, now stronger and wiser, continued their work with renewed focus, applying everything they had learned to prevent mistakes and ensure accountability. As the office lights dimmed on another evening, I realized that the story that began with ignored reminders and delayed salaries had transformed into something much larger. It was a story of resilience, courage, and the power of truth. It was a reminder that integrity mattered, that collective action could overcome deception, and that even in the darkest moments, the right choices could create a brighter future. But just as we began to settle into this new normal, an unexpected notification appeared on the office system. It was a follow-up from the client's headquarters, hinting at a new project opportunity that required our team's immediate attention. The timing was perfect, almost too perfect. A new challenge was on the horizon, suggesting that while this chapter had ended, the journey was far from over. In that moment, I realized the ultimate lesson. Challenges and conflicts would always arise, but how we responded, how we stood together, and how we preserved truth and integrity would define the outcome. The storm had passed, but it had left us stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. The office, the team, and even the humble boss had learned that accountability and collaboration were the pillars of lasting success. And so we continued our work, a team that had survived betrayal, confronted deception, and emerged stronger than ever. The lessons of that difficult chapter remained vivid, a constant reminder that no one should tolerate dishonesty or inaction, and that standing together for truth could turn even the darkest moments into opportunities for growth. The story had reached its resolution, the conflicts addressed, and the subplots concluded. Yet, the subtle hint of new opportunities and challenges left a lingering sense of anticipation, proof that in life, just like in the workplace, every ending is also the beginning of a new chapter. The office had survived, the team had triumphed, and the future, uncertain as it was, felt full of possibility.